Reddit. What is the creepiest, true, story someone has ever told you? Part 2? Please like and subscribe to support this channel. One day I was searching through my drawers in my room and I found a cassette tape of Babar the Elephant. I totally forgot I used to watch that program and listen to the tape. I opened it up and there was a different tape in it titled, New Year. I searched my drawers for a tape player and found one, played the tape and heard my grandpa singing songs at New Year on it, saying that this song was for his beautiful daughters. I take the tape through to my mom, telling her I randomly found it in my drawer. My mom listens to it and starts crying and says that my grandpa died on this very day. Makes me feel like he's looking out for us. As a boy I was deathly afraid of the dark. I'm still always alert when I'm traversing the darkness. One time I woke up in the middle of the night to see two eyes floating in the darkness in the corner of my room. Like a dog's eyes in the dark. Thinking it was my dog I shout to him, "Buster, come here boy." It just sat there. "Buster, come on." Nothing. "Buster, come here right fucking now." Nothing. Scared shitless I lean forward for the light switch, turn on the light and I'm alone in my room. I slept on my couch for about a year and a half afterwards. Probably going to get buried. But here's one that gives me the chills. Not too spooky for those who are skittish. A family friend's grandfather passed away and her grandmother was on her final days. The family had hired an at-home caretaker, 20-ish years old, for her in the meantime. One night before she was going to go to sleep she checked in on the grandmother. She was shocked and partly terrified to see somebody standing over her grandmother's bed. It was a male, in his 20s, slicked back hair, white shirt, blue jeans, rolled sleeves with cigarettes in one sleeve. He was looking adoringly upon the grandmother though. Longingly even. The caretaker backed out of the room scared. Called 911 thinking that it was an intruder and scared for her life. 911 responded and the family was alerted as well. As not to scare grandma, they didn't say there was an intruder, but a false fire alarm. 911 gave the all clear and the family came in to talk to the caretaker. After she gave the description the faces of the offspring went white. They rushed through boxes of pictures that have long been buried. Finally they pulled out one. It was the grandmother and her husband. Husband in his mid-20s. Blue jeans and a white shirt. Slicked back hair. Cigarettes in one sleeve and giving his wife the same loving look. Preface. Not mine. Read this in another thread, and if anyone knows the story I'm referring to and can find a link that'd be great. It was an Ask Reddit thread about the strangest thing that had happened to you, or something. Anyways the guy talks about being a kid growing up in a normal middle American family. Loving mom and dad, siblings, dogs, all that shit. So one night he has a dream where he is being chased by something, ghosts maybe. And in the dream finds his father and jumps into his arms for comfort. As he looks up into his father's face, he sees not his father but the face of some sort of gorilla with no skin. Just an ape's face grinning down at him with muscle and bone exposed. This is how I recall the story. If it gets unearthed and I skewed some of the details, I beg your pardon. So okay, the kid has this nightmare, wakes up all sweaty and piss scared. Great. That morning over breakfast the kid looks at his dad who smiles at him, putting him at ease. This part of the op I remember almost verbatim, and remains the eeriest part for me. That was the last time I saw my father as the man that I knew and loved. After that he turned into a monster. From then on, the story details about how Op's father, over the next summer, began a pattern of abuse that would ruin their family. Summed up, the guy turned into a controlling sociopath who dominated the family and others, creating a cult. Op goes on about how terrible it was growing up in that environment, and how he managed to escape once he reached adulthood, or something like that. So yeah, obligatory, sorry for the wall of text. Hope someone can find the thread I'm referring to. True or not, it remains one of the most chilling story I've ever come across. Okay, this is going to get buried, but this is a legit creepy story involving a jar of hearts. My high school teacher told us a story about his friend living in rural Arkansas. He, the friend, meets a girl at the Walmart register. They talk and hit it off pretty well. She is a nice religious girl, exactly like the one he wanted to be with. They exchange numbers. He calls, they have long conversations deep into the night. They go on dates. She is a genuinely nice girl. She ended every phone conversation with a prayer. "We thank our Father," or something like that. The guy is completely smitten. She finally calls him to come to her house at 7:31 Saturday night. She tells him to come there at exactly 7:30 and not a minute later. She says that if he is even a minute late, she will break up with him. The guy was a Little League baseball coach and had a game on that day. The game was supposed to end a few hours before that, so he accepted the offer. On the day of the game went into overtime, or whatever you call it in baseball. It went on longer than expected. The dude, coach, was getting a little nervous, but he still had plenty of time. The game ended a little late, but 3 of the kids' parents hadn't arrived yet and he had to drop them off home. Panicking, he really doesn't want to miss his chance with the nice girl. He tells him to hop into the car and speeds off. After quickly dropping off the first 2 kids, he decides the 3rd kid's house is too far off, so he leaves him on the road and begs him to go walk home. Yeah, very douche move, I know. He rushes home, showers, gets dressed in a hurry and tries to go to the girl's home ASAP. He arrives at her house at 7:35, 5 minutes late. A woman in her mid-40s comes out and tells him Clarice, the nice girl who called him over, said you are late and wants you to go away. Heaved, dejected, he goes back home. A few days, or rather, the next day I think, later he sees the local news. He sees the house and it looks familiar. It is the girl's house. The police are leading a handcuffed woman out of the house. It is the 40-year-old woman that had spoken to him earlier. Behind her is the girl he was dating. He was shocked as the headline read, "Child Kidnappers," or something like that. He expected the police to visit him soon as well, because he was dating the girl. Soon, as expected, a police officer comes to his house and asks him if he is. The guy is nervous but knows his rights. He asks if he should get a lawyer or not. The policeman tells him that he is not legally allowed to tell him what happened, but felt a moral obligation. This is where the story gets creepy. The policeman says the women arrested were engaging in human sacrifice. In their house they found the missing children's remains. There was blood all over the walls and jars of hearts labeled with the names of the missing kids. There was an empty jar that had the dude's name on it. Turns out, the girl invited him on a date at her house at 7:30 to kill him in a ritual human sacrifice. The ritual apparently had to be executed with precise timing. His being late saved him from being ritually sacrificed. Needless to say, there are some crazy cults in rural Arkansas. So I'm reading these stories on a nice Saturday morning. My 4-year-old son wakes up and opens his bedroom door, just down the hall from the living room. Normal. He's just standing in the door though. Usually he runs out and gives me hugs and we chat and stuff. Not today. Today he just stands there. I asked him, "You okay, little buddy?" He just says, "Yeah. The big shadow is gone now. I'm all better. Fuck this. Fuck you guys. I'm out." One summer me and a couple friends were hanging out with another friend of ours at his house. The residence that he took up at this time was his family's old summer cabin, set in fairly habited little mountain town, about 30,000 people, that I grew up in. We were out in his grassy front yard, playing badminton one evening, when I commented what a perfect front yard he has for such sports. He says that his mother had the front yard redone several years ago, after a tragic accident had occurred. She had all the tall, native pine trees taken out after a group of 5 teenagers rolled their Jeep into the front yard. It was late summer and the whole family was at the cabin at the time. One girl was basically decapitated by a branch and killed almost instantly. Another girl had severe lacerations to her torso. Another guy was knocked out cold. The family helped with everyone's injuries until paramedics could arrive. Instantly I recognized the story as what happened during the death of a girl I grew up with. Her name was Erin. We were in the same Girl Scout troop for 3 years. She lived in my neighborhood. She was only 14. It was one of the creepiest games of badminton ever played for me. Let me lighten this thread up for those who can't sleep. This is an absolute true story in the sense that it happened. Not that it isn't a coincidence. My mom believes that whenever she dreams of poop, she will come into a small fortune that day after. I thought she was kidding. One time she told me she dreamt of poop, and she won $20 from the lotto after getting 3 numbers or something like that. Another time she received an unexpected bonus from her work as an OR nurse. TL. Doctor, I never dream of poop. Sad face. I have a story to share. This is not something that happened to a friend's friend. It happened directly to me. When I was young I was intrigued by the paranormal, as I suppose everyone was. I outgrew it, of course, and unfortunately. Once in summer, I was probably 17 years old, me and some friends were hanging out in the beach at night with some 14-year-olds. maybe younger, who felt like sharing scary stories. I had outgrew the phase. I was bored as fuck, so I just kept saying stupid shit all night, provoking spirits and demons. There was a guy, much older than all of us, who cried when I started screaming, "Satan, this guy's body will host your spirit in 10.9, 0.8, 0.7 countdown," which was pretty funny. Anyways, there is this expression in Greece like "May Mother Mary be with you." So late in the morning, as we are standing up and about to part our ways, I said, "Good night guys, may Satan be with you," and that's when something slapped me really hard. I turned around to slap my friend, thinking he was the one who did. Nope. He was a couple of meters away from me. Then a second slap. Then many sleepless night and me shutting the fuck up ever since. I'm an agnostic and very much a skeptic, but this was always weird to me. About 10 years ago I was sitting in a bar I frequented, drinking a pint. It was a Sunday and the bar was pretty much empty. An older, 60-ish, Caucasian woman walked up to me wearing an Asian-style pointed farmer hat like this, and started chatting me up. I ignored her at first. Then she said, "You know, you have the spirit of Abraham Lincoln around you." I laughed, she left, I didn't think anything about it. Now mind you, I don't look anything like Abraham Lincoln. I have blonde hair, blue eyes, and no beard. Not insanely creepy, but kinda gave me a weird feeling. Alright, I can chime in on this thread. About a year and a half ago, my best friend of 15 plus years and I took a trip out to my family farm, at night, after getting out of our second shift job. It was a nice, clear, crisp early fall night in Michigan. We were sitting there, just chit-chatting away and watching the night sky, when he asked a very peculiar question. He said, "This place has always had a strange feel to it, almost like you are being watched. Did something happen here? Something bad, I mean." I just laughed a little, and I replied that I only knew the stories that my father told me. I told him about how when my great-grandpa purchased the farm in the early 30s, that it was a big family project to keep it up and running. Relatives would come and help with the chores, and in exchange, be able to hunt the land for food. My great-grandpa had a cousin that came over one day, helped out, and asked if he could go out later that night to do some coon hunting. He of course, got permission, and set out shortly after sundown. The next morning, my great-grandpa noticed that his vehicle was still out in driveway, even though he should have left hours before. It was still dark out, but my great-grandpa knew the area of the land he would be hunting, and set off in that direction. He walked back towards the back pasture field, and as he came around a bend, he hollered my cousin's name. He heard a strange, yet familiar voice answer him back. He said that the voice chilled him to the bone, that something wasn't quite right about it. So he called out again, and this time, the voice was for sure not his cousin's, but almost like a growl imitating his voice. He said he hightailed it out of there, never looking back. When the sun came up, he took a big group of relatives and farmhands to look for him. They found his gun, loaded, but not fired, his hat, which was covered in a brown liquid spattering, and that was all. My great-grandpa looked for any signs of him for over 60 plus years. The only time he ever held out hope of finding him, my dad said, was when the swamp in the pasture fields by where he was supposed to be hunting dried up. Needless to say, there is more to this story, but as I have already written quite a long post, I will leave this as it is for now. If you want to hear more, let me know, and I will post the rest of the strange events that have happened on my family farm. My friend told me this about a month or so after his mom passed away. She died of a heart attack while she was taking a walk out in their back garden. No suspicious circumstances or anything. Everything was normal around their house for about a month. Then, my friend swears that strange things started happening. The garden where she died just seemed to stop being healthy. All the plants just died even though they were still being watered on a somewhat normal basis. And to add to that, strange noises could be heard throughout the house and sounds of things being knocked over. One night, he was woken up by one of these noises, so he walked from his room to the kitchen to get a drink of water to try and set his head straight. When he came around the corner, he swears he saw his mother standing at the stove cooking something, and he said you could smell it. The ghost of his mom or her apparition or whatever turned around and looked at him and smiled. He started to back away, and he wanted to scream and run, but he just couldn't bring himself to do that. The ghost walked out their back door onto their deck, and beckoned for him to follow. He did. The ghost walked out to their back garden, back to where his mother was found. He stood there and just watched it for a few minutes. The ghost stood on the exact spot for about 10 minutes, and this whole time my friend was being quiet and trying not to shit his pants. Eventually this apparition went away. My friend stuck around for a few minutes after just to be safe. Afterwards he went back inside and tried to fall back asleep. The next morning he just thought he had a bad nightmare. He went outside to the spot in the garden where the ghost had been. His mother had died, and on the exact spot where the ghost had stood for that 10 minutes, was growing a group of about 5 roses, one for each member of their family, he claims. My friend, his sister, his older brother, their father, and one for the dog. I at first didn't believe him. That is, until he sent me a picture of the group of roses surrounded by all the dead plants. I wish I still had the picture, but this ordeal took place almost half a year ago. Still gives me chills when I think about it. I can't even begin to imagine what it's like for him. A few years ago, I took a summer-long trip where I would stay at people's houses overnight to sleep and such. When my friend and I arrived at the house, we met the husband and wife who had 2 sons in the military and 2 young daughters adopted from a tribal country that I can't quite remember. We asked about their daughters, and the mother tells us that they were very nice children when they were adopted, except for when they would take them to church with them. The girls would start acting crazy and yell and scream and act completely different from how they normally acted. Eventually the girls became Christians, and the behaviors completely stopped. They believed that the girls had been demon-possessed. That night, I was asleep in the house on the top bunk of a bunk bed with my friend on the bed below me. I had completely forgot about the story I was told and didn't even remember about it until after what happened. I could feel something was wrong in the room. Then my bed started shaking. I was a bit nervous at first, but I figured it was just my friend, so I woke him up. I asked him if he was shaking the bed, and he said no. Then I asked him if he could feel the bed shaking. He said no. I could still feel the bed shaking very clearly, and I honestly was scared. I closed my eyes and tried my best to ignore it, and I eventually ended up falling asleep. I woke up the next morning and told my friend about it, and he said that he felt something really wrong in the room as well. I never actually saw anything, but it is one of the scariest experiences of my life. The house that I grew up with was pretty old and always gave me a really weird feeling. A lot of strange things happened while we lived in that house. For one, my sister, who was about 2 or 3 at the time, would say really strange things. Once while sitting on the couch watching a movie with my mom, she pointed up to the ceiling and said, "I want to go up there." My mother asked her where she wanted to go, and she said, "Up there, Mom. With those people over there. They're nice to me." No one else saw anything, and we were too creeped out to ask further questions. Another strange thing my sister said in that house was around the same time. While my dad was giving her a bath, she asked him, "Do you remember when I used to take care of you and Mommy?" He was really shocked, and he asked her what she meant. She continued to reminisce, "I remember when you two were really little. I took care of you." He basically noped right out of there. Not only did I personally have an outer body experience in that house when I was 7, we also called the police one time because we heard glass breaking and people walking in my house. There was a lot of noise going on that night, like things tearing and breaking. My family was terrified, and we locked ourselves in the bedroom we all shared. When the police got there, there was no one in the house. Nothing was broken and everything was fine. Every time I drive by that house I get the creeps. I don't believe in ghosts or haunted houses, but I lived in this house for a year, and I swear to God there was some evil shit going on in there. For starters, there was a lot of folklore about the house. Back in the day, it was a tenant house for hookers. After that, it was a trap house which got raided by the DEA, confirmed by the landlord. Allegedly, they found a dead body, 4 keys of heroin, 50 pounds of crack, etc., etc., etc. None of that was ever officially confirmed. After that, though, the house sat vacant for a few years before the landlord put it back up on the market. And then we moved in. Upon touring the house, my roommates and I found strange graffiti and writing on the walls, most of which was covered over by yellowed, peeling floral wallpaper. There were cobwebs everywhere. It looked like some bums had been squatting there from time to time. Empty bags of potato chips. One room reeked of piss. Being 4 dumb, broke-ass college kids, we took it and said it was just kitschy. On move-in day, I found the broken end of the pusher from a syringe in the corner of my room, as well as some bloodstains on the floor I hadn't noticed during the tour. It should be noted that my room was the smallest, about the size of a closet, with a tiny window which looked out a brick wall, a door that couldn't stay closed, and a noticeable bump in the middle of the room. It was previously 2 houses on the same property. They were put together around the time it first came up for rent, in the mid-60s. Now, the following things happened repeatedly. One roommate heard the sound of a dog barking coming through his air vent on a fairly regular basis. Another roommate would wake up to find objects, even big ones, like his desk one time, had been moved around his room. He locked his door every night before going to sleep, and started using a voice recorder to monitor noises. Nothing, not even the sound of sleepwalking. We all saw shadows of people who weren't there when walking around. Especially at night, I heard rape screams coming from one of the bathrooms in broad daylight. Like, loudly. And it got louder as I got to the bathroom. When I turned the light on, the scream stopped. No one was in there. This happened twice, both on Tuesdays. Bread frequently molded the day of or the day after purchase. Occasionally, the house would smell horribly, distinctively like something died, for no apparent reason. We blamed the possums in the ceiling, and we couldn't go into the attic because we didn't have the key. Oh, and did I mention that our ceilings were that cheap shitty stock board they use in public schools? Worst of all, these fucking tiny ass fruit flies would spawn in our front yard every time it rained over the summer, and they would swarm the house by coming through the cracks at the bottom of the doors. The following only happened once. Brace yourselves. We found a knife. No one knows whose it was or where it came from. It just appeared one day. One of the sinks started dripping, not flowing, but dripping blood. Slowly, like a fucking horror movie, all the lights went out. One by one. They didn't turn on for 10 minutes. The electricity and the breakers were fine. When one roommate and I turned off the TV, we saw the reflection of some guy wearing a hat standing behind us. Obviously, he wasn't there. We heard an old, 1960s style dial phone ringing. We all had cell phones with special ringtones. A window opened itself. We heard someone walking around on the roof outside. Blah, blah, blah. Wasn't there. The microwave flipped itself upside down one day when we went out for a roommate's lunch. And the creepiest of all, there was a standing pool of blood in the kitchen one morning. No source has yet been identified. It became a joke. The house is possessed, and all that bullshit. We even made a drinking game out of it eventually. But the truth is, we all had horrible sleep problems and nightmares the whole year we lived there. It got to the point where one roommate basically moved in with his girlfriend of a week just so he wouldn't have to sleep at our house anymore. On top of everything, the negative energy of the house turned us all against each other and wreaked havoc on our mental health, all of which started getting better as soon as we moved out. I dunno. Like I said, I don't believe in ghost stories. But I'll be damned if I didn't spend a year in hell.